Aloha and good afternoon. Thanks for joining us here on This Is Now. First at noon, pulling out all the stops. That's what both presidential campaigns are doing as the race for the White House nears the finish line. Now, 23 million people have already cast their ballots ahead of Election Day.
The two candidates are seeking to drive more supporters to the polls. Bree Jackson has the latest from Washington.
Closing arguments coming into focus in the closing weeks of the presidential race.
Our country deserves to have a president of the United States who is not afraid of good ideas and does not stand on pride.
We are going to have the biggest victory in the history of our country on November 5th.
Throughout his campaign, former President Trump has made immigration a key issue. His plans include resuming construction of the border wall and reinstating a policy which forces asylum seekers to remain in Mexico while awaiting court dates.
We will stop illegal immigration once and for all. It will be ended.
As campaigning winds down, Vice President Harris's warnings are growing stronger.
What we must understand will happen starting on January 20th in this choice. Either you have the choice of a Donald Trump who will sit in the Oval Office, stewing, plotting revenge, retribution, writing out his enemies list.
Harris taking her message a step further with plans to deliver her closing argument on the National Mall Tuesday from the same area where Mr. Trump gave his speech on January 6th ahead of the attack at the U.S. Capitol.
And we're going to the Capitol.
The Harris campaign also rolling out a series of concerts, including a scheduled appearance in Texas with Beyonce, whose song Freedom has become the campaign's anthem. Mr. Trump will also be in the Lone Star State Friday, doing an interview with podcasting giant Joe Rogan. Both candidates relying on star power to get out the vote as the race remains neck and neck. A new CNBC survey shows former President Trump leading on economic issues, while Vice President Harris has the advantage on character issues, including honesty and the fitness to be president. In Washington, Bree Jackson, NBC News.
An Israeli airstrike on a school where displaced people were sheltering in the central Gaza Strip killed at least 18 people today. The strike came as Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that negotiations over a ceasefire and the release of dozens of Israeli hostages would resume in the coming days. NBC's Raf Sanchez reports from Tel Aviv.
The Israeli military carrying out an airstrike on a school in central Gaza today. Local authorities there saying at least 18 people were killed. The majority of them were women and children. Israel says that it was targeting Hamas militants who were operating a command center out of that school, but no warning was given before the attack was carried out. And we actually went back and reviewed IDF statements. We found at least a dozen schools have been bombed by the Israeli military in just the last month. That's according to their own public statements. Now, Secretary of State Antony Blinken continuing his tour across the Middle East. He was in Qatar earlier today, and he announced that mediators will meet again in Doha for the first time since the killing of hardline Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar last week. Blinken described Sinwar as the main obstacle to negotiations moving forward, but there are real questions at this point about whether new life can be breathed into these talks. The Israeli Prime Minister's office today saying that he will send the director of Israeli intelligence to Qatar to take part in those talks, and he's expected to meet with CIA Director Bill Burns. Raf Sanchez, NBC News, Tel Aviv.
New today, HPD has opened an attempted murder case in the Waimanalo area. It happened around 11:40 last night. We're told a 27-year-old man was riding his bike when a car hit him from behind, throwing him onto the hood. He tried to flee on his bike, but police say the driver chased him, causing the biker to crash into a chain link fence. The male driver fled the scene and is still on the loose. The biker suffered minor injuries. Another travel-related case of dengue has been confirmed locally, this time in Windward, Oahu. Some Kaneohe residents received a letter saying a community member recently contracted the virus. Health officials say the person recently traveled internationally to an area known for the virus and has since recovered. State vector control teams will be spraying pesticides in an area spanning 2 football fields around the newest patient's home, which has not been disclosed.
It's not like the old school DDT trucks where you fog the whole neighborhood. It's really much more specific in looking at areas, in particular where mosquitoes will be flying and then potentially resting.
So far this year, there have been 13 dengue cases in Hawaii. Symptoms include fever, nausea, vomiting, rash, and body aches. In news across the nation, the FDA has honed in on a possible source of the E. coli contamination linked to McDonald's chains. Investigators are focusing on Taylor Farms as the source of these slivered onions on the McDonald's hamburgers as the likely source of the contamination. A spokesperson for the FDA confirmed to NBC News that Taylor Farms is part of the investigation and added, "We're looking at all possible sources." U.S. Foods, a distributor, sent a notice to customers that it will recall 4 raw onion products because of potential contamination and was doing so out of an abundance of caution. The outbreak has been linked to at least 49 illnesses, 10 hospitalizations, and 1 death. And because of this, a Colorado man has filed the first lawsuit against McDonald's relating to the outbreak and its quarter pounders. Eric Stelly's lawyer says he tested positive for E. coli after a few days of pain and is still recovering. The lawsuit accuses McDonald's of product liability, negligence, and a breach of implied warranties. It was filed Wednesday in a Cook County, Illinois court, the county where McDonald's is headquartered. The lawyer representing Stelly says he's also representing at least 10 other alleged victims of the outbreak. McDonald's has not commented on the lawsuit. The chain's USA president said Wednesday it's safe to eat at McDonald's and affected ingredients are probably out of the supply chains at restaurants.
Heartache on the grounds of the state capitol as families remembered 13 murder victims. They all had one thing in common. Their killers were all supposed to be trusted loved ones. Ben Gutierrez has the story.
The event commemorated the lives lost to domestic violence in Hawaii and efforts to raise awareness and resources to a problem that is still resulting in deaths.
Make sure that we say the names of the individuals who have passed away by domestic violence in the last year. It's important to remember our victims and to honor the families and bring healing to our community.
Christina Baca.
Christina Baca is the latest name. Her body was found with gunshot wounds last month in a storm drain near UH Manoa. HPD says murder suspect Gibran Copeland was her boyfriend.
We look at there's been presence of firearms. We know that some of them have been choked or strangled.
Those grim factors are tracked by the Hawaii Coalition Against Domestic Violence. The list of 13 victims read tonight includes the Oda family, who were stabbed to death by their husband and father. Zoe Hay, whose boyfriend is accused of strangling her, and Misha Johnson, who disappeared from Schofield Barracks and whose husband is now behind bars. On one night in September last year, 365 adult and child victims of domestic violence were counted in Hawaii shelters. There were 110 calls to domestic violence hotlines, but victims also made 20 requests for services that couldn't be met because of a lack of resources. Teresa Cachuela had a protective order against her estranged husband when he shot her to death 3 days before Christmas last year. Her mother was at tonight's vigil.
Honestly, I'm still in shock. I still cannot believe that she's gone. And I wish she was still here because it's like a hole, you know, like I feel broken.
That heartache is fueling awareness and change.
We're going to continue to recruit psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers so that we have more capacity, because a lot of people would like to get help and tragically they don't find someone that can help them in time.
We need to do more. Domestic violence is still happening. We don't want to list another name of somebody who's passed away by domestic violence. We want to make sure that there's more being done to support the survivors in our community.
And the victims' families are also trying to find some healing.
You know, I forgive. I'm starting to forgive a lot that has happened. And that's the only reason why I can stand out here and just give everybody else hope. And give my daughter a voice and give everybody else a voice who needs to have a voice to speak up and say, hey, this is not right.
The governor and some families say there is legislation in the works to strengthen temporary restraining orders to better protect victims. More resources against domestic violence are available on our website. Ben Gutierrez, Hawaii News Now.
Family and friends are remembering a Hawaii reality TV star who died after a car crash in Kahala on Sunday. Mahealani Richardson has more.
Family members say 34-year-old Sarah Dancer, who was from Castle Rock, Colorado, had lived in Hawaii for about 12 years. She starred in the Discovery reality TV show Naked and Afraid, the All-Stars show, and more recently, Fight to Survive. Dancer lived on a boat at Kewalo Basin and was known for her global adventures.
All right, friends and fam, now's the time. We're officially taking off.
But on Sunday, Honolulu police say a crash involving two vehicles happened in Kahala on Diamond Head Road east of Polka Street. Dancer was a passenger in a car and wearing a seatbelt. The 59-year-old male driver, her friend, was traveling eastbound when the vehicle lost control and collided with a parked car. Dancer was hospitalized in critical condition. The driver was in serious condition. Two others were in the parked car. One was in serious condition and the other refused treatment. Police say speed appeared to be a factor, but not drugs or alcohol.
I actually saw how much of a difference she made in the lives of others.
Sarah's father and brother arrived at the hospital yesterday and say when she passed, she was wearing lei, scarves, and bandanas thanks to her friends.
Magical is the way to describe her. Sarah had this positive energy about her that just really it filled the environment that she was in.
I think she saved my life once diving in Indonesia.
Dancer survived cancer twice. Friend and fellow diver Tim Mason says the community is heartbroken, but he remembers large watch parties for Sarah.
She was smart. She went under the water. She found food, slugs and snails and stuff like that. We would probably go, but she knew what to do to survive, and she did great. At the party, the place would be full. And it was so inspiring, but she loved to show that this is what you can do. This is what I did.
Sarah Dancer worked at Island Divers Hawaii in Hawaii Kai, and the company is planning an ocean memorial with her family.
The company also called her an ambassador to the ocean.
Mahealani Richardson, Hawaii News Now.
City leaders are pushing for an overhaul of Oahu's sewer fees that would more than double most bills in the next decade. In what would be the first fee hike since 2016, the series of increases would start next summer and eventually raise bills by 115%. The mayor says that cannot be put off any longer as the city needs more than $10 billion for improvement projects and upgrades. The fee increases would also connect more homes to the sewer system and eliminate thousands of cesspools.
We stalled making this decision as long as we possibly could, but this is inevitable. This is about the future of our island. You know, we understand the impact on people with fixed incomes, and we just understand it's an increased cost of living here.
Inflation, milk, we're paying more for groceries, we're paying more for everything, and it's getting way. These young kids that are getting out of school, they'll never afford a home in Hawaii.
The changes, which still need city council approval, would also base 50% of a bill on actual water usage. Right now, that's only 30% of a bill, with the rest being a fixed fee. The city says it's also created a program to help low-income families pay their fees. Striking workers at Boeing are extending their walk-off after a failed contract vote. 64% rejected Boeing's latest 4-year labor deal, continuing a 6-week strike. The new offer included 35% wage hikes and increased health and retirement contributions, but workers say the sticking point is the loss of their pension.
It is the direction society is going, and it's not right, it's not okay, but our members are dealing with that. We haven't been able to achieve that, and I can't say that we will by staying out on strike.
Boeing has not commented on the failed vote. Before ballots were cast, the company reported a $6 billion loss last quarter. The FAA has started an audit of 45 major airports aiming to reduce close calls on the nation's runways. Just days ago in San Diego, air traffic controllers briefly put 2 Southwest planes on a potential collision course. Chris Van Cleve has the story.
Southwest aboard.
As this NTSB animation shows, a FedEx 767 came within 150 to 170 feet of landing on top of a Southwest 737 at the Austin, Texas airport last February. It was an extremely foggy morning. Air traffic controllers in the tower couldn't see the runway, but cleared the Southwest flight to take off and FedEx to land. FedEx Captain Hugo Carvajal was at the controls.
And as soon as the tower cleared them to take off, we knew that there was an issue because we were about 3 miles, which is too close at that point.
Just moments before possible disaster, FedEx First Officer Robert Pradine saw something through the fog below.
I saw a light that turned out to be the position light on the Southwest airplane, and quickly saw the silhouette following that and called for a go-around.
What goes through your mind as you're seeing an airplane that shouldn't be there?
Obviously, there's a moment of disbelief. Am I really seeing this? Is this really an airplane right there? And then training and experience kick in.
Last Wednesday, another close call near the Austin airport when the FAA says a Cessna unexpectedly flew within hundreds of feet of an American Airlines 737 on approach to land from Chicago, forcing the pilots of American Flight 2587 to take an evasive maneuver before landing safely. And earlier this month in San Diego, controllers briefly put 2 Southwest planes on a potential collision course after clearing one plane to taxi across the runway the other was using to take off.
Southwest 1478 canceled takeoff clearance.
Former NTSB Chair Robert Sumwalt was part of an FAA committee reviewing close calls that made 24 safety recommendations.
I certainly think things are moving in the right direction. It's important that those of us in the aviation profession, we not lose vigilance and that we continue to push for better procedures, better technology, better staffing, and that we don't get complacent.
The FAA says close calls, especially those happening on runways, are rare and on the decline. In a new audit, the agency will look to identify any additional gaps in procedures, equipment, or processes at the nation's 45 busiest airports. Recommendations to further reduce the risk of runway close calls are expected by next year. Chris Van Cleve, CBS News, Washington.
All right, let's take a live look outside. We're going to take you to the East Coast, New York City specifically, where it's 65 degrees on this October day. We're going to have your forecast with Guy Hagi after this quick break.
smells it on this Thursday. There are some high clouds drifting up over the state from a disturbance to the west. Of course, those high clouds don't bring in any rain. It's relatively dry this morning, except for a few minor splashes for a handful of windward spots. And because of these light winds, though, there's a chance for afternoon clouds and maybe a few spotty afternoon showers for some interior spots. And it's going to be a little bit sticky, right? But otherwise, Thursday is going to be very, very lovely, especially with those high clouds in the skies. We could see some beautiful sunrise and sunset skies. So just a few windward and mulka showers to start the day. Drier by the middle of the day, for most of the day, actually. Although late in the afternoon into the early evening, clouds will build and we could get a few spotty showers around the mountains, but widespread rain not expected until the weekend. And the surf's going to be building this afternoon. Look for a northeast swell to be picking up. East sides could get to high surf advisory levels by tomorrow, and then there's not a whole lot happening for south or west shores. So heads up, first alert for this weekend. We're expecting stronger winds and more rainfall starting Saturday night through Sunday, even into Monday. And still going to be brisk and breezy with some scattered showers through the middle of next week.
King Charles and Queen Camilla participated in a traditional Ava ceremony in Samoa today. The Ava ceremony is an important Samoan ritual where the ceremonial beverage is shared amongst officials and guests to mark an important occasion. The royal couple donned traditional Samoan attire during the visit. King Charles was bestowed with the title of Tui Taumeasina, or King of Taumeasina. The royals were also presented with traditional gifts to thank them for their presence. There are more than 4,000 emojis to help people express themselves online, but none of them have black or mixed race hairstyles. Now a group of design students is determined to change that. Tina Kraus has more.
These young campaigners each have their own hairstyle, but when it comes to expressing their do in the digital world, they say there's not one emoji that works.
As a black creative and someone who's constantly changing their hair, this campaign is really personal to me.
This London youth group wants to break down beauty stereotypes with the first ever emojis featuring afros, braids, cornrows, and locks.
I feel like there's a negative stereotype around coarser hair textures amongst like Afro hair.
Especially in a school environment, it's things like people wanting to touch your hair, talk about your hair. It will make you feel like you don't belong.
Students started sketching styles, revealing how they'd like to be seen in a bid to tackle texturism, a form of discrimination where Afro hair is perceived as unprofessional, unattractive, or unclean.
There were so many different designs. It was so hard to just narrow it down to just 4, just because black and mixed race hair is so diverse.
And my emoji wasn't quite complex to draw, as it was just an Afro, but it was nice to see how it came out.
Designers will submit their symbols to the California group that approves or rejects new ones.
There's a lot of history behind our hair. We take a lot of time to do our hair. So for us, you know, it's important and want it to be seen in a positive light.
They're hoping their creative and inclusive emojis will make the cut. Tina Kraus, CBS News, London.
Los Angeles Dodgers superstar Shohei Ohtani's historic 50-50 club ball has been sold at a record-breaking price. The ball was auctioned Wednesday for almost $4.4 million. Ohtani became the first baseball player to hit 50 home runs and steal 50 bases in a single season. According to the auction house Golden, this is the highest price ever paid for a baseball or any ball in any sport. And the streets of downtown New York are covered with seafoam green confetti following a historic ticker tape parade honoring the New York Liberty. The WNBA team won the league championship, capping off an impressive year of viewership and ratings. CBS's Jared Hill has more from the parade route.
The New York Liberty painted the Big Apple seafoam green. Thursday, the new WNBA champions headed up Manhattan's Canyon of Heroes.
I'm so happy for the ladies finally bringing it home to New York.
Amid the floats, music, and celebrity sightings, there was a wave of inspiration.
It's the first time that New York has seen a basketball championship in, I believe, 51 years, and it's the women that brought it, and this team is like clutch.
It is only fitting that the very first New York City ticker tape parade honored the Statue of Liberty in 1886. Now, over 130 years later, all of this is helping to usher in a new era of women's basketball. In the most viewed WNBA Finals game in 25 years, the Liberty clinched the league championship Sunday against the Minnesota Lynx in overtime of Game 5. The team had been chasing the trophy for 28 years, falling short at 5 finals. This sweet victory follows the most successful year in the history of the WNBA, with record viewership, attendance, and merchandise sales. Some credit is going to the league's rookies for inspiring a new crop of players.
I think the Liberty team are like role models for a lot of people in Brooklyn and all over the country.
And WNBA players are now fighting for a bigger slice of the revenue pie, estimated to be $200 million annually after the league secured an 11-year agreement with Disney, Amazon Prime, and NBC to broadcast more than 100 regular season games. This week, the Players Union opted out of the current collective bargaining agreement and is ready to negotiate. Jared Hill, CBS News, New York.